Welcome back. I'm going to turn this over to Barbara.
Well, thank you to Lisa and to Sunshine. Lisa? Oh, okay. Hi, Lisa. Always glad to see you. So I think the way we proceed is Lisa responds to what Sunshine said, and then we open it up to more general committee discussion. Okay? Yeah, Barbara?
I introduced myself as Barbara. I have no idea why. I've been Babs for
Babs.
however many years. Anyway, Babs Buttonfield. Lisa, let me echo Sunshine's comments. I really enjoy your enthusiasm, and it's still holding, so good for you. I have two questions for you. The 2018 end-to-end test. I got Pierce County, Washington. This is a geography question, of course. Pierce County and Providence, Rhode Island, and the third?
Bluefield, Beckley, Oak Hill, West Virginia.
Okay. Can't walk and chew gum at the same time. The other question I have is about the budget. You showed us a chart that went from 2014 to 2017, showing the budgetary commitments for the decennial census, the ACS, and the geography. And I wondered, how did these years, the 2014 to 2017, leading up to 2020, compare with the years leading up to 2010? Were the proportions of increase the same, do you know? Because the increase for the decennial census is high relative to the ACS, and I'm wondering if that means that less work will be done to test the ACS.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I appreciate it. I don't know the scale up off the top of my head. I certainly have that and can look at it. But to your question, to your comment about whether that will affect the ACS and testing of the ACS, so I was focused earlier on the changes that the difficult decisions and the changes that we made in response to 2020. We have also made difficult decisions in response to the American Community Survey. And I can talk about that at a high level. So for this fiscal year, for example, we have suspended our efforts to do what we call general performance reviews. It's a very strange name, so let me explain what those actually are. I don't know why they're called this, but they are. Tim's laughing. It's where we send a supervisor out with an interviewer, a field rep, to observe the interview and provide that on the spot feedback. So that was one of the things we suspended. We also canceled field interviewer training. So we were going to do some additional training and retraining. That we're not going to be doing this fiscal year. And those are the things that we have suspended at this point in the time. We have other things that should the budget, Tori's telling me there's something else, but I'm not remembering, in March. Oh, that's right, thank you. The third change that we made, the difficult decision that we made, is we, in March, implemented a change to our telephone center operations for the ACS. So many of you will remember the ACS is a multi-mode study, a multi-mode survey, with the first being a self-response period. We then follow up in the second phase with a call center operation. We're reducing the number of call contacts that we're making as a result of some of this. Those are the changes that we put into place while we're under a continuing resolution. We still don't know, of course, what the final budget level will be, and we'll address any additional changes that we might need to make at that point in time.
Maybe before we take additional questions, if you could respond to Sunshine's commentary and questions.
I'd be happy to, sure. So I took some notes, and I'm sure I didn't get everything, but I'll do my best to cover a whole bunch of things once I find my scraps of paper. Okay, so I'm going to start with since your final thoughts are still up, I'm going to start with those. The public opinion testing is still ongoing, so I can give you a big thumbs up about that for right now. It's at least been ongoing through this fiscal year. We are running to the end of the current contract vehicle, so we'll have to assess funding as we go. We do recognize, though, that this is critical. It's also a critical part of our planning for the communications contract. And you may remember, and I don't remember what it stood for. So, I do. You may remember for the 2010 census, we had fielded a survey we called CBAMS. I think it was Census Behavior and Attitude and Motivation Study. Part of what we are planning now is the next iteration of CBAMS. So we will continue to do that as well. But I do want to reassure you that it is still ongoing, and we would be happy to share the results of what we've learned so far with the public opinion testing, or maybe even put it on an agenda for a future meeting if you'd like. I'm sure, while she's not here, I'm sure Jenny would be happy to talk about it at a point in time, so.
So I'd love to do a follow-up question on that.
Sure.
And maybe I should have given more detail on this as well. I mean, part of, if I was trying to do a research study to anticipate what could potentially happen in terms of, a more politicized environment, that I would take advantage of the 2017 and 2018 tests and do explicit user experience surveys, focus groups, and of both non-responders and respond. And I wasn't, so in terms of, yes, public opinion testing, but I wasn't sure if you could give a little bit more detail. Is this just overall attitudes, or is it actually in response to people who are participating in some of these tests?
Yeah, so the work that's ongoing is overall attitudes, although there are some specific questions that help us understand a little bit more. To be clear, in response to your effort, our original plan for part of the end-to-end test as part of our design was to do some partnership and communication activities. That work has been defunded and descoped as part of our pause. We just don't have the resources now to do the planning to allow us to field it in the end-to-end test. So that's not something we're actively working on as a separate engagement from the ongoing work that we currently have. But I do, and I appreciate your point and I value it. I think it's important, and the reality is we had to prioritize what those systems are and what the needs are to keep us on that critical path. To speak to some of the other comments that you've made, it is our goal, and I think either I or Shireen probably said this last time, the census test data that we've been collecting over the years, it still is on our list to make that available to researchers. We've been exploring how we'll make it available to folks in the research data centers. We just haven't had the staff resources available to really put those data sets together, so how we can do it, but it is something that we want to do and we intend to do. So we agree with you about that importance as well. Some other things that you had mentioned, you had asked about the North Carolina test and whether there were any lessons that we learned in terms of behavior or response to kind of the current environment. And I should reframe that test a little bit for you. So this was our address canvassing test. The address canvassing test actually had very, very limited interaction between our listers and housing units. They didn't knock on doors. They didn't really interact with the public directly. That said, they did interact. I mean, they're walking the streets, so they see people. But, and we did learn some things. I mean, in particular in North Carolina, hiring was a bit more challenging for us than we had initially expected. We were able to quickly ramp up our efforts around that and bring some extra resources in from the Atlanta regional office to help with recruiting to ensure we had the necessary workforce. But in terms of what we could have learned to inform kind of materials or training or things like that about attitudes, it really wasn't a good opportunity for us with that. You asked in a few different places. Oh, sure.
So I actually went down to North Carolina with Congressman Meadows and observed the testing down there. When you get out of Washington, you find that a lot of the issues that are floating around here just don't happen, and people are more worried about their daily lives and things like that, and not what's going on in Washington. And you sort of got a strong sense of that in North Carolina, that there wasn't much concern with the national politics. It was all what's going on with me and my life.
Okay, so continuing to move through the comments that you made, the very insightful ones. A lot of questions about administrative records. I'm actually not going to respond to any of them because Tom and it's Tom, not Andy this time. Sorry. Tom and Mary Ann actually are going to cover all of this in their presentation later today, and then I think if there's further conversation we want to have about it, and they can do a much more thorough job than I can, so it would be better for them to handle that. At a couple of different points, you talked about the plan, the advertising plan, the partnership plan that we're working on and how CSAC can help. I think this is a wonderful opportunity. We're working now with Y&R, Team Y&R, on the development of that plan. We do expect to have that in May, and we'll have several months where we can work together to solicit comments and really help improve that. And we'd be happy to do that. And Maria, who's sitting right there, she's our decennial point person for this effort, and so I'm certain she'd be happy to work with you, and that's something we can certainly do. That's a great opportunity where work is progressing, not locked in, and we need help, right? I mean, these are the things that we really want to work with everyone on, so that would be great. Another area that you mentioned, and I'm going to volunteer people, and I didn't get a chance to talk to them at the break about it, but that's okay. You had talked about metrics. This, I know, speaking for Deb and myself, this is a hot topic for us, and it's one that we haven't locked down yet either, what all those kind of cost and progress and reports are and things like that. So we would be happy to have a follow-up conversation if we want to talk about some of what we're looking at to use for measuring success, and then if you have ideas or if anybody has ideas for how we can improve that, or if there are things that, given the use of technology that we're bringing in that we just haven't even thought about that we might need, this is the perfect time. Our goal is to have at least, I don't want to call it a prototype because they're real reports, they're real tools, but to have most of these measures defined and spec'd out so that as we're running the 18 end-to-end test, we get a real feel for how those data are flowing in. So I think that's another area that would be just absolutely wonderful to kind of have some of that result. I know you talked a bit about the process for user experience and how the integration of the findings were worked in. I think Jason's going to talk about that when they show the demo, or Alexa maybe when they show the demo of the internet self-response test. And if they weren't planning to, I'm guessing they are planning to now that I said that. So, I'll say one other thing and then leave it with that. That was Alexa's laughing in the back. That was something that we heard you, all of you, very clearly. I think it was about a year ago when we did the Primus demonstration, and that feedback was really important. We've had 2 full reports done on what we've been doing and how we're doing it. We're really operating in an agile process. We have a product owner that really is and that's Jason, who'll be presenting to you. That really is the kind of single belly button to push, or whatever example you want to use, for ensuring that integration happens. I know from personally watching that process and providing guidance through that process and working with the team that user experience was one of the things that Jason was actively advocating for, working with our colleagues in POP, working with our colleagues in R&M to ensure that we could get the best user experience for this test as we could. So while I'll be very interested in your feedback, we still have time to make additional enhancements before the 18 end-to-end test. I do think it's important to recognize that, we've been working on the system that we're showing you for just a few months, and we are using it. It's live, so that's great. But we have time to make additional enhancements. So I think I'll talk with you about that process, but the point I wanted to make is I know it was foremost in his mind as they were working through it. Those were the big things I noted. If there's other points, I'm happy to talk, or, yeah.
Jack?
Jack Levis. I wanted to, if we can, just real quick, go back to the address canvassing question, and there's going to be a compound question. So I think we've all had to make tough decisions, right? And when that happens, you're giving up one good thing for another good thing. So I got it. You mentioned that the estimate was 25%. Now you're looking more like 30%. So the first question is that due to that's just the way the data came in and it's going to be 30 versus 25? Or is it because there was work you wanted to do that would have lowered it? And if the answer is there was work to be done, so you're already saying no, so I could stop, I don't need to go to the other questions. It's just that's the way it came out.
So just to explain a little bit, and I don't have the percents, Deirdre may know them by heart,
That's okay.
I'm not sure.
It's not.
But when we come out of interactive review, we had a certain threshold that we're coming across as stable. We had a bucket then that was unresolved, that was going to active block resolution. When we take what was coming out of active block resolution and being resolved, that's the basis for how we made that estimate. It's a little more complex than that, but oversimplifying it, it really is based on what we thought we would have resolved before going to the field.
So the moving of the priorities it has nothing to do with the 25 to 30%?
No, the 25 to 30% is the result.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Ken, and then Kathy.
You showed us some, Ken Simonson, you showed us some contracts that had been signed in the last several months. I know that often government contracts get protested, And I wondered if these had been signed on time, if you have reached any milestones with them, so you would say that they're on schedule, or if there have been some hitches that have shown up, and similarly, if there are some other contracts that are either pending or that you're hoping to hit a certain date for them, and do you anticipate any problem either on funding, protests, et cetera? And then finally, I know the General Accounting Office looks frequently at census, and I believe they've listed this as one of the at-risk areas. And so what have your responses been to that?
Okay, how long do we have? All right, so yes, your question is great, I appreciate it. We did award, I believe it was several of our large-scale contracts, and we did have protests. We have worked through most of that. We're still in the process of taking some corrective action on one, but that is an issue for us, but we have worked through those. I think, though, that the real answer to the question is that, you know, you had asked, are we on schedule? And for the most part, our contracts were awarded as scheduled. Some have been delayed. Device as a Service is a particular one that I can quickly, without looking, tell you has been delayed. We had originally hoped to award it several months ago, then we had hoped to award it in early May. That date has slipped even further, and it's a result of due diligence. We still have enough schedule that I'm not worried right now about the delay in the award of that contract. We will still have it awarded in time for us to have the devices procured for both the end-to-end census test and for the 2020 census. In terms of other things related to our contracts, the large-scale contracts that we have awarded, the deliverables we're receiving are the deliverables that we expected to receive when we needed to receive them. So anytime we're working with large-scale contracts in this environment, it's an added complexity, but frankly, the census is a complexity of complexities. And that's what makes it fun. That's what makes it challenging, but that's what we do. And that's what we manage. So it's risk, yes, but it's risk that we can manage.
Kathy?
You mentioned that part of the 2017 test was oversampling on the American Indian, Alaska Native, because you were experimenting on some of the tribal, is it affiliation questions? Can you talk a little bit about that? I remember some results from the early content report.
Sure. So as part of this test, we are testing the feasibility of collecting information on tribal enrollment. And this would be a separate question. And I do want to point out that, you know, we have released the subjects to Congress, and that deliverable is out there. And if you look at the subjects, tribal enrollment is not a subject. So we are not proposing to include this in the 2020 census. But we are down a path, and we had made commitments to test the feasibility of whether we could even collect this information. Thus, the need to oversample in Alaska and in areas with large American Indian and Alaska Native concentrations.
Irma?
This is Irma Elo. I have a couple of questions. One is that what testing do you plan to do that the infrastructure can accommodate millions of people getting online simultaneously? I think none of these tests have large enough samples to really allow you to test that.
Sure.
And related to that is, what are your contingency plans if some of these components fail? I mean, I know you don't think they will, and you're confident that they won't, but that's always a possibility.
Sure.
And so have you sort of in the back pocket something then you can pull out that if things actually don't work as you expect?
So I'll start with the second and then move to the first, and then Kevin can help me out with the first one as well. You know, and I appreciate the questions, Irma, thank you. The census is a contingency of contingencies. See, earlier we were a complexity of complexities, now we're a contingency of contingencies, right? While I would like to believe that none of these technologies will fail, we are planning risk mitigation around them in case they do fail. Our goal is a complete and accurate census and to count everyone once and only once in the right place, but we can't do that alone, and we are dependent on things to work. One of the contingencies that we have around it is that we have multiple modes and multiple opportunities for people to respond, right? So throughout the self-response phase, while we are pushing the internet first, we have our telephone questionnaire assistance centers, and we will, for the first time, take responses over the phone. We've scaled the telephone working with our contract, we've scaled appropriately to handle peaks, to understand. We have external demand models that we've built to help us understand where those peaks and valleys will be and what the resources are. And we have technological resources to help us manage some of that. In addition to the internet, in addition to paper, in addition to the internet, in addition to telephone, we also have paper. And we've designed our paper data, I shouldn't say we've designed, like past tense, because we are currently designing our paper data capture centers to handle both our expected workload, but should there be an event that causes more paper forms to come in than we were expecting, A, that we have the paper questionnaire forms available for people to use, and B, that we have the capacity to handle that increased volume. From a technology side, again, and Kevin can best address this, or Atri, one of the things is that you're absolutely right. The tests that we're doing right now they're large tests. I mean, for a survey, they're 700,000 households is large, 70,000 households is large, but they're small compared to the census. They're not the load that we're expecting. So we're continually doing load testing. We're continually doing things like penetration testing. And we have those things planned. I'm going to defer to Kevin to talk a little bit more about that, though.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, so from the load testing, it's absolutely right. We're not going to be able to test with actual users the load we're going to see in 2020. But we are taking simulations of that many people responding to the survey, and these are standard things you do within technology to performance test it. We're watching the application, then we can see where things may or may not need to be adjusted. I'd like to say as well, we are absolutely going to use federal cloud to help us move this forward. So we're taking intentional steps of how we're designing it so that a lot of the responses, they're all coming through the cloud vendors. They can respond to the scalability needs that we have to bring things in appropriately. So yeah, we can't have a user execute the test, but we absolutely can simulate it many times before we get to the point of the 18 tests as well as for 2020.
I have a question, and then Andrew, and then Dan, and then we'll see which time it. When you talk about metrics for success, and one is accuracy, I heard once a couple of meetings ago it mentioned, but haven't heard anything else about the demographic analysis estimates, which is a major way of doing accuracy. And I hope that you're still planning to do this. And I have two other questions, actually. The second is, it's good that the president's recommended budget is higher than the fiscal year 16 budget, but the activities are also increasing. And you're on a continuing resolution, I guess, now, and who knows what's actually going to happen. But I'd be curious to know how the president's recommendation for fiscal year 17 compares to what the Census Bureau thinks they need for fiscal year 17. And if you got the president's fiscal year 17 budget, what kind of shape would you be in? The third thing, which you said you're not going to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway, is, because you kind of can't stop me, like a big hook comes out.
It's all good.
It's about administrative records, even though you want
Sure.
to defer it.
Okay.
Because the session, and I think that Bob's going to have some things to say about it. The session is entitled about administrative record for NRFU efforts. But what we've asked about several times, and I still don't, in the past, and I still don't recall an answer, is what are the plans and what's the status of the plans, and maybe I'm just ignorant where I shouldn't be, for using administrative records, not just for NRFU, but for attributing individual responses where you don't get them either due to an incomplete form or where you think there's a person you've gotten no answers at all.
Okay. Okay, so let me start with the easy. Yeah, we're still doing demographic analysis. I think Enrique's over there with a big thumbs up. Coming out of Pop Division myself, that's something that I completely understand and completely support and see the value of. That's absolutely still part of the plan. I want to clarify some statements around the budget because your question, so that I can appropriately answer your question. Right now, what the director was talking about was the president's information regarding the FY18 budget. What I was talking about were the impacts related to the FY17 budget.
You could answer for both.
I suspect the answer is sort of the same for both at this point, which is, right now we're operating under a continuing resolution. We have an idea for 17 in terms of numbers. earlier in the year of what the Senate mark was, what the House mark was. John
So-
wants to interject.
So I think on the budget, what's apparent is the president in 17 submitted a budget, and the Senate came back with a mark that was $100 million below that, and the House came back with a mark that was $125 million below that. And we're operating under a continuing resolution right now. And we have plans to operate at any of those levels. But that's the publicly available information. 18 is just in, the president's budget has not submitted a budget for 18. We've seen the blueprint, but we haven't seen the budget. The budget will come out in May, and that will start the iterative process to define what the president's, to define the budget for 2018.
But also, how different are these than what the Census Bureau thinks they need for 2017 and 2018?
So 2017, the president's budget reflected what we thought we needed.
Okay.
That's what we asked for, that's what we got. For 2018, we're not ready yet to discuss the president's budget because we don't have a president's budget yet.
And then this is for the last question, which was about really how we're looking at using administrative records for edits and imputations. I'm going to look to Tom and see if he wants to say anything. I was trying to give him the eye, but it wasn't working. I'm sorry. Yeah.
And for Kara,
Please
one of the
state-
slides,
please,
yes,
Tom, please state your name.
Tom Muley. As part of I do have a slide this afternoon which talking a little bit about character for the characteristic imputation, or also for the short form items, how we're potential usages of administrative records. We are working with population division and our housing statistics divisions on the demographic side to have a kind of coordinated approach, and we can talk about more about that this afternoon.
Thank you. Andrew, and then Dan.
Andrew Samwick. Just a quick question about a remark you made about the interactive voice response. You talked about two groups, one that did get referred to a person and one that didn't. I'm not sure yet that the ones that don't get referred get their question answered. So how are you tracking that all the way to completion?
That's a great question, and I think it's a valid point. I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer it. I saw Kevin Zajac here a minute ago, and I'm not sure if he still is, and he can talk a little bit about, or Lam, I see back there too. He's ducking now, good job. Seeing if they could talk a little bit about the process. What we do know are the data to date, right? So if someone goes through the IVR process and hangs up, we don't know if that information is resulting in a response per se, but our assumption is that that their question is being answered. I don't know if you want to add anything more.
Yeah, so you're exactly right that I think with the IVR, I think it needs a lot of work, needs a lot of development in order to kind of be productive for what the callers need. A couple things that we would look at typically would be click codes on what questions that that callers had gone to within the IVR, and seeing kind of where, if they had called back multiple times, so looking at like a repeat callers to give us a sense for whether or not these were actually whether they were getting the information that they needed, or whether they may have just gone kind of found some information and just broke off at that point in the IVR. Additionally, like if we're seeing patterns of people going into the IVR, going to common points or going to common questions, but still not ending in the IVR, going to an agent after that, it may signal to us that some of the information that we have in some of our questions within the IVR need clarification or may need additional information. So those are just kind of a couple samples of things that we would be looking at.
Okay, Dan?
Dan Atkins. So if we make an analogy between the execution of the census in around April of 2020 and a NASA moonshot, could you sketch for us a little bit, what is mission control, who's in charge, who makes the calls, the extent to which there is a formal pre-flight check that makes sure, for example, the optimizer switch is set in the right place, like you were saying before, and how do you respond to unexpected things along the lines that Irma was asking earlier? Could you just sketch that a little bit for us, what you're envisioning?
Sure. It's a great question. It's a hard question to answer. It's not a hard question to actualize. It's a hard question to answer, though. The end-to-end test the 2018 end-to-end test is the test that we are having our first opportunity to pull almost everything together. You know, one of the things that has given me comfort over the last 4 years as we've progressed is that each of the specific field tests that we've done have layered in another operation or another set of operations or another set of technology or another procedure. But they've all been somewhat siloed in that approach. But in the 2018 end-to-end test, that is, and we used to call it this, we're calling it an end-to-end census test now. It really is our dress rehearsal for the census itself. It's where we bring the business processes, we bring the operations, we bring the management structure, we bring the continuity of operations, we bring it all together. One of the challenges and opportunities in doing any large-scale effort like a census is it is an extraordinarily matrixed environment. And I have very, very, very strong partners in how we do this. Tim, sitting here, is leading our field effort. He likes to say that, you know, we're writing the plans, I forget how you put it, we're writing the plans, we're the putting it together, and they're the execution force. We're the brains, he's the brawn. That's what he likes to say. Kevin, down at the other end of the table, he's my partner in all of our information technology decision. I like to say that the three of us are the three musketeers, and that everything we're doing for the census, we're doing in sync. And we have to, because it's that complex operation that's matrixed across everything that we're trying to do. We have extraordinarily strong leadership support. We have our operations center, we have very, very clear communication and guidance and support for how we're doing it. But ultimately, just as, you know, I've watched the movies, I'm sure you have too, just as when we're watching the movies about NASA sending something to the moon, there's that team of people that are doing it. That team of people is us. And we're doing it together.
And I was asking for something a little more tangible, like is there a room in this building where somebody's going to be
Well, that's a much easier question to
have an overall
be.
view of
Yeah.
what's happening, and you're going to be staying up 24 hours a day, or you're going to be passing off overall control?
That's a much easier question to answer. And first I'll answer it with Tim's, which isn't at all the answer you like, but it's the one I like. Tim and I sit across the hall from each other, so, you know, that's where we are. But no, in all seriousness, part of what we are building out through the technical integrator contract are those, you know, war rooms, operation centers. So we will have those, and we are intending to use that. The Bureau already does for its ongoing effort, but we will be doing something for the census itself. Absolutely, yes.
I think we ran out of time for questions, unfortunately, even though we had a...
Maybe two more. We have 2 more minutes.
Okay. Jack, you get your question.
Yeah, Kevin, it has been years since we got a technology update about the infrastructure platform that will go on. We talked abstractly years ago about cloud this and services that. Could you give us a 2-minute update? Like, did you pick a cloud vendor? Are the systems implemented already? We're just a little out of sync.
I'll do my best in a few minutes. So currently right now, as Lisa mentioned, we're running the new technology that we selected. So we selected Pega as a business process management tool, as a platform to put most of the data collection entities on top of, to write through. So internet self-response, the internet self-response for the call center to use is going through that, as well as the operational controls. Currently today, that's running up in Amazon Web Services, so the Amazon Cloud. We will be evaluating cloud vendors as we continue to see what we would like to do, but that's based on just needs of likelihood of needing to have 2 vendors or not, and we're still going through those conversations. But it's up in the cloud. Most of the data collection will go through the cloud. There's a lot of intentional things we've done in the design to protect the data. Public trust is paramount in this, and then public confidence as well. So we want to make sure the data is protected and the respondents feel very confident in that. And then secondarily, they have multiple modes, as Lisa said, to respond to the census. And the internet and some of the call center depends on the internet as well as part of those entries. The data collection will be secure from the cloud infrastructure, and we will be sending the data back to census in our data center behind more protection within firewalls and other security to do some of the back-end processing and things. But as the census is going on, the data being collected, all the operational decisions being made, all of the enumeration, all that's going to be happening in the cloud for the scalability factors to meet our needs.
Do you see any risk?
There's always risk, and as Lisa said, it's a matter of managing that risk. I will say that from the technology aspect, I, as the CIO, am not going about this alone from risk. We are engaging federal expertise, industry expertise, really looking at how we design things to minimize that risk, to make sure that the data is secure, and then the responses can continue to come in as it's available. And there's a lot of intentional things we've done to separate the application. The simplest way I can explain it is this is a super large room, very open floor plan. From technology aspect, that's bad. What we've done is put every divider up. We've made this room into many, many, many different little rooms and subcompartments. So we can watch everything that's going to go through a door to get into a room. We're going to put the right security and solution in each one of those rooms. So as people respond to the internet response, every room they go into validates who they are, makes them more secure, protects who we are, instead of having it be an open room. And a lot of these intentional things allow us, as the evolving threat of cybersecurity comes up, to make some very key moves if we see a threat to react to it.
Tommy has an announcement, and then we get our picture taken.
Tommy Wright. Members are having a dinner with the director tonight at 7 o'clock. Please assemble in the hotel lobby at 6:45. But I do need a show of hands of people planning to attend. I think we have 11
And you pay
people.
for yourself. The Census Bureau does not pay.
Yes, thank you. And so I need a show of hands of people, and if someone, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I just counted. Did anybody else count with me? And 18.
Yeah.
I got 18. John didn't raise his hand. 18. Thank you very much. We will have a group picture now with the director the dinner tonight is at La Perla Restaurant. So it's right near the hotel where you're staying, I think. But La Perla Restaurant, it's on Pennsylvania Avenue, 2600.
People are going to gather in the lobby at 6:45. The reservations for 7 o'clock. It's at you turn left when you come out of the hotel, and it's about 3 blocks.
Right. I think the official photographer is here. She's standing, and she's going to ask members of the committee to join the director just outside these doors. And following that, you're going to grab a lunch, and we're going to be back here at 11:45. Back here at 11:45 for a working lunch. Thank you very much.